Waitaki, Te Tiro Mai. That's how long we've been going for. She was literally a newborn.
Is it 8 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before co-governance. before
it was invented.
before pua, before things
Before
soured.
racism.
Yeah.
Tēnā koutou katoa, piki mai, kake mai. Welcome to Gone By Lunchtime, the manic pixie dream girl of political podcasts. Hello, Annabelle Lee Mather.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Ben Thomas.
Kia ora.
It's December the 8th, 2023. I think this might be our penultimate podcast. Maybe we'll do a cheeky little bonus podcast on the year in review and all of that sort of carry on. But for today, also, kia ora, Sam Robinson, our muse.
Kia ora, Toby.
Producer.
How are we doing today?
Good. Yeah, good.
Also here.
Oh, also, Waimihia.
No, Waitaki.
Waitaki, sorry. Waitaki. I confused Annabelle's children.
So do I, all the time.
It's been a busy week for you, Annabelle. Basically, you've just been collecting awards the whole week. What did you win at the TV Awards?
We won Best Māori Program for New Zealand Wars Stories of Waido.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And then another award you won in the last week or so. What was that?
Oh, like the most mana enhancing of all awards.
Yeah.
The New Zealand Podcast Award for the greatest current affairs podcast of all time, which
Wow.
of course I share with my two brothers here.
Sorry, got to put popcorn in my
Do you want me to Heimlich you?
It's emotional. Second year in a row of that award.
Second year in a row.
I like how they're trying to make the fake awards real.
They're
by
not
like
fake awards.
by
You have to stop with this
benchmarking
narrative.
it with
Ridiculous
us. Like they have to give
negging.
it to us 3 times to kind of give the award credibility, and then
Like Beetlejuice.
Uh,
Is that the same?
No, I was thinking more like you bring. I thought more like sort of signing great players to your new cricket league or something like
Right.
that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's been an interesting fortnight or so, hasn't it? After the calm, serene pause that we had, it's become very shouty and busy. And
Everybody's very worked up.
I love that pause when we're all just the bosses of ourselves.
it's like
I was into it.
Yeah, no, look, something that's very underrated about MMP is the periods where there's no government.
Yeah.
Or actually, it's not even no government. It's actually the grand coalition that we always talk about, which is that the caretaker government can't do anything without the consulting the incoming government, which basically means it's Labour and National just have to agree, and they can only do what they agree on, which is extremely centrist things, and everything else just gets punted into the future. So, I mean, which is actually very similar to our political system in general, but it's really brought to the fore.
there hasn't been a lot of riz in the last few weeks. Not a great deal of riz. That's just a word I use a lot.
There
So yeah.
What's Riz?
What's riz? Oh, it's just a word we use a lot. I think it's short for charisma.
It's short for charisma, and
It's the word of the year. And who was it? Oxford? Someone?
I think so. Yes, it's the window for slang coming into and vernacular coming into like dictionaries. Like it's very short now. Because the dictionary companies just like us, are desperate to remain relevant.
And it's a very short life cycle because then people like us say those words aloud and kill them dead.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's over now. That's the scene of death. What do we have?
R.I.P. Riz.
We had. I don't think we got into this too much last time. Maybe it was just sort of as it was happening. There was all of that early action in which Winston Peters was kind of like photo bombing Christopher Luxon's every early appearance and going hard on the bribery and deciding to kind of animate himself by going full borderline conspiracy on the media. And then we've had...
It was sort of a live action kind of video of like, you know, how to deal with your racist uncle at Thanksgiving. Like, you know, as Christopher Luxon just sort of serenely smiled his way through.
And he probably got it about right, didn't he? Because it's that kind of...
I think he had to.
You've just got to kind of put an arm around the uncle, give him a thanks for coming, and put a brandy in his hand, right? Like that's...
Yeah, that's...
Otherwise, you end up ruining Christmas. We had this 100-day plan that was published, which was not the same as the 100-day plan that National released during the campaign, obviously, because we have a coalition government now.
Yes,
and it had 49 points, which was like was it 50, and they had to take one off? I don't know. 49-point plan. Or maybe that's just where they
might have just miscounted,
and it was a lot of. It was like the bonfire part 2. Yep. You know, the year has been bookended by politicians trying to roll back the Labour government's policy program. The first person to do that was the Labour government itself in the form of Christopher, and now it's the change government in the form of the coalition. A lot of repeal, stop, cancel, all of that, and. At the same time, we also had all the smoke-free thing became a big thing, right? And all of those headlines around the world, which, I mean, I know that some, like Houghton wrote that they'll love that. It'll show that they're changing things. They didn't love that. Of course you don't love that when your first appearance in the great journals of the Anglosphere are basically saying new government cancels this brave new smoke-free world. The UK is, sort of copied New Zealand's version of it. It's really interesting. I mean, but there was a survey out showing that 4 in 5 young people, I think it was, supported the measures. Anyway, that wasn't good. And then we had Parliament resuming, a debate on Gaza in the House, which I think is a very healthy thing to happen. Did you watch any of that or the early exchanges in Parliament, Bells?
I've seen a little bit of what happened in Parliament. I agree, Tobe. I think it was good to see Gaza come up for debate in the House, and that was one of the first things that Winston did.
He put the motion, and then there were various speeches. Damien O'Connor was very forceful. He used the word genocide to describe... the Māori Party and the Green Party were, as you'd expect, very solid. The ACT Party pushed back a bit on that. Then we had the speech from the throne, of course, which is where the Governor-General delivers words that seem to have come from somebody else because they do. It's funnier when it's the Queen's speech or the King's speech as it is in the UK, because they're so... It's like when you get the sort of animated character doing, you know, those Aardman things where you get a dog speaking and someone else. This is very, very strange. And then we had the first debate, and we had the first question time. Did you watch all of that, Ben? Were you also glued to Parliament TV?
I've actually been really busy, and I used my best endeavours. I watched the speech from the throne and a few of the speeches in reply. Had a gander at the first question time yesterday. I think Luxon would probably be very relieved that they're back in the House, and the focus goes very much on the Prime Minister at that point. You know, for the first week and a half, almost 2 weeks, where he was sort of officially the Prime Minister, and had, you know, after declaring the government, he really was fighting for space with Peters, to a lesser extent Seymour, but. And not just in terms of the sort of attention, but the issues. You know, I mean, National never campaigned on repealing the smoke-free legislation, and you know, but that was pretty much, you know, almost the first sort of or the remainder of the week after the 100-day plan was announced. You know, that was what Chris Bishop was talking. Unfortunately, Chris Bishop was talking about on Q&A. I mean, it's very unfair that poor old Chris Bishop has gotten all of this flack for the smoke-free repeal stuff.
The one little dairy in Northland.
Yeah, well, but yeah, no, well,
single
we'll
supplier
get to that. But
of nicotine in the whole of.
Obviously, Bish notoriously for
potato.
I think a couple of years. When I was working at the Beehive, he left the Beehive. He went and worked for Philip Morris for a couple of years. missed the game too much, came back, rest is history. And because of that, he's been sort of pilloried about this smoke-free repeal. But it's like, there's all these conspiracy theories like, oh, what's his connection to big tobacco? It's like, you don't need to look for any conspiracy theories. Like both coalition parties that National needs to govern demanded it in their coalition agreements and got it in writing. And that could either be on the basis of personal freedom, all sorts of reasons, but
I think to be fair too, like they've played that game as well. Like the PIJF is an example of where they're like, well, it's about the perception. Journalists may not have been bribed, but it's the perception that it could have been, and that's I think exactly the same thing.
Answer in his first post-cab, wasn't it? First post-cabinet press conference, and an interesting response, a pragmatic response. To say, well, there is a perception out there. Also, I think it's disingenuous. I think it's a bit of a facile response, because as soon as we start going down the track, we're guilty of this too. It's all this optics talk. Aren't we in a time where we've seen the kind of truthiness trouble? That's truthiness. Oh, it seems true. It's kind of, that's the, so it's your job to say it's not true. And I think actually Seymour has been better on this. Seymour has said, I think there are all sorts of problems with the media. He's got all sorts of issues with the media and, whether they're right or wrong. He's also clear that he doesn't think for a second that there was bribery involved in that fund. He doesn't approve of the fund. But I think you could say that straight out. It's not true.
I mean, there were plenty of problems with the PIJ. I mean, one of the worst designed policies. Like if you had $50 million to help journalism, I think it would be hard to have come up with a worse plan than the PIJ, which created a lot of short-term jobs which weren't sustainable, created massive salary expectation inflation, and funded marginal projects that, obviously hadn't sort of made the case that, that people sort of, had to do really quick short-term sort of pitches for. It was terrible, and it had the effect on journalism, the same effect as sort of peacekeepers coming in and spending money in East Timor or something, in terms of like sort of screwing up.
It had some good effects.
I think it had some great effects. I think that, programs like Te Rito and some of the journalism training, the local democracy stuff that we've seen, I think it's important to remember that fund was established in response to the industry basically saying that they weren't going to survive through COVID with like dropping revenues and all of that sort of stuff. And was it the most well thought out program funding plan in the whole world? No, it wasn't, because it was it came around in the era of, shovel ready, hammer ready products. And I agree, it's a real shame that some of those positions, now that things have picked back up again, haven't been rolled over.
It's also worth remembering, although, we don't want to go too far down this particular track, that it was part of a range of media support measures, including there was $20 million that was to waive cordia fees and transmission fees. But what about that? That was for nothing. In a way it was thought about too much, I think, the PIJF. And, I'm speaking partly out of an interest of someone who works in the media business, but it was kind of massively overcomplicated. It would have been better to. Where was the version of our cordia? That it's kind of like you're in a really tough space. Oh, there was some subscription money that came in from MCH as well. So was that was a kind of more effective way of supporting businesses that were struggling through difficult times in COVID. Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on, because otherwise
let's not make it all about
turn
us.
To the fold.
Speaking we're clearly the most
speaking of optics
people.
And strategy, that's the thing. How did Winston Peters guarantee that he was front and foremost in as the representation of the new government? After the announcement, he picked fights with media, and it worked. It worked perfectly.
He's got a problem now, though. He's got a problem in terms of that strategy, which they adopted, deliberately to say we are going to try and appeal to a particular constituency of people. Now, that's not just the same people who deride and disapprove of the PIJF. I'm talking about the particular group of people who believe whether it's that COVID is a hoax or that the vaccines are these terrible, malicious, globalist, agenda-based, nanobot-filled expressions of evil, blah, blah, blah. Those people, I've got a piece on this coming out soon. Those people are now furious at Winston Peters. The whistleblower, quote unquote, from the data guy from the Ministry of Health was on Alex Jones yesterday in front of an audience of more than 1 million people saying, I want Winston to come. Where's Winston? Liz Gunn was on posted a video saying she went round to Winston Peters' house to try and get him to. Now, this is a group of people who aren't like some other constituencies who you might pander to. They are fixated. This is to the core of their identity, and they are saying to Winston on this, Winston, where are you? Why aren't you standing up in Parliament? Forget the media stuff. Why aren't you standing up in Parliament and saying, this is the truth about COVID that is being revealed? Winston Peters is not going to do that because he's an intelligent man and he doesn't want to. It would be reputationally very damaging, and so they'll try and find a way. But it's a risky business that they've got into when you go down that rabbit hole.
It's interesting, because I know that there's been a bit of a debate going on between the commentariat and people who enjoy watching politics about exactly where Winston stands on this. And I think at the start a lot of people thought that it was just a sort of cynical approach where he's identified a potential group of voters that he can bring into the New Zealand First fold, but doesn't necessarily believe it. And then I think people's opinions started to shift in that they believe that Winston really had brought into the conspiracy theories around COVID. Then, of course, we had the WHO thing being a part of the new coalition deal. But then this happens, and clearly he's not engaging with them. So it's quite fascinating to see how this is rolling out. And, potentially that newly harnessed support base could end up flipping and turning against New Zealand First.
I think that's a real risk of that happening. You go very quickly in that world from a hero to a villain, and there's not a lot in between,
And it was always going to be a tightrope, right? He's the foreign minister.
Right.
He's the foreign minister, but he's got two of the items that he secured in the 100-day action plan were distancing us from multilateral institutions. I mean, it's easy enough to sort of, in a drafty school hall in Taupo on the campaign trail to say, we need the UN butting out of our business. It's much harder to say if you're the foreign minister. And you're a small trade dependent
and I think,
nation.
I think the cynical part of me thinks that was based on we just need to put a couple of things in there. Look, we've done that, and then that stuff will blow over. And we'll be able to get on with the business of being a government, and I can go and do the foreign. I don't know that it does blow over. I just think it's a different community, to the ones that perhaps in the past with, they might have thought that's fine. People aren't going to come and give me shit about not following through on shutting the borders to all migrants, because that's just a part of people's business. This is core to people's identity. Anyway.
I think too, the challenge that New Zealand First has is that they've picked fights on multiple fronts. So you've got this one where, he's presented himself as the saviour of the anti-vax movement, but that's, starting to fall away. You've got so much of New Zealand First's focus on Te Pāti Māori and criticising them that is drawing more attention to Te Pāti Māori and making, drawing more supporters towards them.
I think that plays to their advantage though. Remember, New Zealand First only need 5%, 1 in 20 voters to vote for them at the next election to remain in Parliament and possibly still be the kingmaker. And that will be front of his mind the whole time. Every time they've been in government so far, they've fallen under the 5% threshold.
And whether they've calculated that right or not, I think that's absolutely right. And that is in there in both coalition agreements. But there are flags that are being flown to particular groups for whether it's New Zealand First or ACT, rather than just kind of we'll find ways of where our meeting points are, or a bit more there or a bit less there. They're like, look at these things that we did. They're banners.
I guess it depends on what's your long-term goal, because the reality is the positions that he's taking appeal to a much older voter base, and the attention that they're giving to Te Pāti Māori, which clearly has a much younger voter base, is better for the long-term gain of Te Pāti Māori than it is for New Zealand First. And I truly think that if we keep going on this trajectory, Te Pāti Māori will probably hold the balance of power after the next election.
They're playing things very well. You got to hand it to them. I was one of the doubters who was surprised by their outstanding result on election night and then after the recounts, because I had been looking at that party vote and thought, well, it's not moving. In fact, it's going backwards, if anything. They managed to really drill into people the importance of the electorate vote and managed to get, use their networks to secure those wins. The other thing is, I'm not on social media, so I was caught a little by surprise by this, just like Christopher Luxon. But how much notice was there for the protests on Tuesday? That was organised at pretty short notice, right?
Yep.
And I think that sort of portends this sort of a kind of newer way of being in opposition. I think that Te Pāti Māori have been pretty straight up. They're not going to talk seriously about policy or anything. They didn't in their first, the last 3 years. They won't this time, I don't think. But what they will be doing is acting as a focus point and using that platform not just for press releases, speeches, sound bites, but to actually organise.
If you want to talk about
protests,
seizing and setting the narrative, as Parliament opens, both in the House and around the country, Te Pāti Māori
chef's kiss.
They're incredible.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those protests. Remarkable so early in the term to have it. And now, Annabelle, there were, Te Pāti Māori organised most iwi, some iwi were involved in it too.
Waikato Tainui and Kingitanga.
But now it's done. They've done the protest, right? So the protest's done. That'll be it for the term. That's all.
It's all finished.
Just kind
of
done, make a point. Now we can crack on.
Mic drop, and then everyone goes back to their papakainga and waits for the next election. Yeah. That's exactly right. This is essentially his coalition government is completely skipping any honeymoon period and going straight to complaining about your Māori neighbours and trying to balance your checkbook. And it's not going to go away. And I think what people forget is that, iwi like Waikato Tainui, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, Ngai Tahu, they're billion-dollar iwis now, and they are not going to resile from their position when they see their rights being encroached upon. And so this is the beginning of a campaign that's going to run over the next 3 years. And again, I think that ultimately it will be to the benefit of Te Pāti Māori that they're able to riff off these types of movements to be seen as key coordinators in them. And I think, it's only going to grow their movement.
Yeah, I think that what Te Pāti Māori appreciate that I'm not sure the other parties do, maybe the Greens do, but I don't think they're well placed to take advantage of it, is that there is a huge number of young New Zealanders who are primed, right, by Instagram. They want to be involved in direct action on social justice issues. They want a Gazan issue or a Black Lives Matter or something in New Zealand that they can sort of throw themselves wholly into. And that's a much broader audience than it used to be for people who actually want to go to a protest. Like right now, there's actually a market gap in New Zealand for mass protests. And the Māori Party, I think, are very well positioned
for a lightning rod,
that's right.
And there might be others too. But if you look at the number of bullet points in the coalition agreement and the 100-point plan, I mean, there's just together we've got just to very quickly go, clamp down rollbacks of co-governance, Te Reo names and Crown agencies demoted, to put English names first, Māori Health Authority gone, require referendums again for setting up Māori wards for councils, review the work of the Waitangi Tribunal, revisit references to the treaty across most legislation, treaty principles referendum bill, that's the act, goes to select committee. Interestingly, in the House yesterday, Christopher Luxon asked about that, said, that's as far as it will go, quote, which I haven't heard him say before, which is kind of is like, voting something through to the select committee, but now signalling, conscious of the damage it might do, I think, that they'll lock it off there. And then most recently we've had...
right, because that's not what they've agreed to. They've agreed to, getting it that far and then considering whether or not they take it any further. So I imagine Seymour will be really annoyed by what he said. And again,
right. That's not the agreement.
It speaks to the fragility of holding those three partners together.
And then you had... The latest thing to add to that is this thing about the allowances in the public sector for competency in te reo.
So now that's a weird one.
It's a weird one, but it became a bigger, and then Nicola Willis rode it back a bit because it was originally described as bonuses, and then it became about kind of competency in te reo and so on.
Turns out it's an allowance to recognise the fact that you've got to drag your colleagues through waiata practice and stuff. That's a strange one because the working model I've got for the coalition government on treaty Māori issues is that Luxon has relatively sound, if not particularly well-developed, sort of ideas about Te Tiriti, etc., that he was willing to give up a lot of things that he saw as largely rhetorical or sort of, less important in the coalition agreements, including, the creaking weight of sort of the list of bullet points about things like, agency names and using English and not having a referendum about Aotearoa. Now, of course, not having a referendum about Aotearoa, Luxon would say, of course, put that in. That's free. That's free.
Yeah.
I'm a businessman. You're getting something.
Make English an official language. Meaningless. It is.
I'm not giving away anything. But of course, what he is doing is he's signing up to a document that is unrelentingly hostile to Māori in public life. And so it is a vibe, but vibes are important. And that's why it was, perfectly legitimate to have a vibes-based protest about no particular policies from Te Pāti Māori and Waikato Tainui, etc. So that's my working model is that Luxon thinks he can pursue his general sort of goal of devolution, localism, working with iwi for better social outcomes, that kind of thing. Because he said, in his speech from the throne, he specifically name-checked working with iwi providers for better social services and devolving things and working together. So I don't think there's not going to be any sort of spectre, from Oranga Tamariki through to health, where suddenly all of these Māori providers or iwi or whatever are shut out of contracts or service provision. I think that'll probably expand. But there is all of this kind of collateral stuff from the coalition partners, which Luxon just wants to sort of disabuse any responsibility for.
Well, it's not all coalition partners, though, is it? I mean, you talk about the Māori Health Authority, co-governance. There's a bunch of stuff that is national policy. So, but given all that, Ben, my question for you...
But the weird thing is then I don't understand why a National MP and a National Minister, National's Deputy Leader, Nicola Willis, is opening up another front about collective agreements, which is it just seems... unbelievable to me because
in the week that you had marches that are like the pilot episode for a series we're going to see, as you say, Annabelle, throughout this term, and given what you said as well, Ben, about how there is kind of an energy, whether it's in social media, more broadly generational, you're called into Luxon's office to give him some advice. How do you reset this? Because if those few words in the speech of the throne aren't going to cut it, do you say, you need to give a speech, mate? Do you say, because, he's going to go to Waitangi, it sounds like his signal, which is a good thing. His signal will go there. How long for, we don't know. But what do you do? How do you turn this around? Or do you just keep talking about the price of cheese?
I think that I think the preference would have been to let it die down, move on to the next thing. I think that might have been possible, except that, for whatever reason, the New Zealand political year is regarded as starting with a whole host of Māori-themed events. At Atana, which I think should probably be optional, but Waitangi, King Te Heitia, his hui is going to be in late January.
And you've got New Zealand First, who keep talking about Te Pāti Māori, which just keeps drawing attention to it as well.
Absolutely. So I think he is going to have to take it head on. I think he has to talk about his vision and not sort of just play up this for everyone's needs. But, have those messages. Say, look, this is, what we're doing is, because there's plenty of needs, right? Saying that things are based on need instead of race doesn't actually cut much down, because there's a lot of need out there, you're not going to run out of need anytime soon. There is no risk of that. And, get out there to, Māori providers, get out there to iwi who have got programs and, talk to them, be seen to be talking to them, talk about how good their programs are and how you want to replicate those, or how you want to,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way. He does need to distinguish himself from his partners, because the thing is, a lot of the median voters that National are going to rely on to stay in government are not cranky old racists.
I don't know if he can. This is the nature of the three-way coalition that he has. Even, I'm sure that this is not what he desires, to be constantly talking about how regressive his government is when it comes to Māori issues. But there's not a lot he can do about it, because that's literally what he's signed up for. And if he's to disavow himself of his own policy program, then he gets offside with his coalition partners. So I don't know what can be done. I don't know if this is, the roller coaster has been set in motion, and I don't know if he's going to be able to get off before the loop-de-loop bit.
I mean, there is a broader problem, which is consistent with the mandate they were given. The 100-day plan is replete with Control Z. It's all undoing programs. And that makes it difficult, I think, to then say, here's my, the speech from the throne, fine. But, and they had the conference yesterday, that Stephen Levine arranges, which ends up in the book, in the post-election book. And one of the interesting things that I've seen reported in Joel McManus's piece in the Spinoff this morning is Luxon stressing that he thought that Labour talked above people, that their language was above people, which is an interesting insight, and that he tried to speak as simply and clearly as possible, boil things down to the, which is why he did sound a lot like talking points on High Rotate. That was a deliberate strategy. Isn't it time now that he does just have to stand up and give like a reverse orewa? Give a speech and say, these are the things that are important to me. This is the New Zealand that I grew up in, how far we've come. I mean, you think it's too late for that, Bells? I think anything he can do to bring some good vibes would probably be beneficial. I think, in the bonfire of policies, literally he's just left sitting in the ashes of the last Labour government without painting a vision of what his New Zealand looks like. So I think that if he's to kind of come out of the cloud of criticism that, of what Hitkin said in the House the other day, repeal, burn, whatever, that, he needs to start not only describing what he wants, but what's the rautaki to get there? Because that's what we don't see at the moment. It does seem a bit like a hodgepodge of stuff. That's the nature of the coalition. An historic three-party coalition, which is a hell of a thing. But isn't that it, Ben? What's the putting a few stakes in the ground and saying this is the, it's the brighter future. Sorry.
The brighter future, the cusp of something special. The great ambitious for New Zealand.
Ambitious for New Zealand.
Luxon hasn't said that he's ambitious for New Zealand for quite a while. I think he's got complacent by referring to it as the greatest country in the world. Look, I think we overstate sometimes just how specific people have to be when they're outlining their vision for the future. What it's more about is appearing positive, being associated with positive things, announcing things that are positive, whether your government did it or not, just talking, reminding people that good things are happening in New Zealand. Summer.
How good is that?
I mean, this is, we're past the annual nightmare where we, are asleep and dreaming that New Zealand is not a tropical island. I mean, it is that kind of thing. He's by the very dint of sort of, the way right-wing or centre-right parties talk, they talk about, business opportunities, growing economy. It's very hard to sort of just show that, in a news soundbite, because it's the whole economy. And it really is the vibe a lot of the times in terms of business confidence. So he's just got to start being more positive. That will mean a lot more time away from Winston Peters and David Seymour.
I was going to say, that's the thing that's hard. It's hard to be positive vibes when your deputy is not really a positive vibes kind of guy.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. And so he's got more scope, during the summer to sort of, during the summer I hope they all get a rest because it has been a long year for the politicians. I'm glad that they said that initially they were talking about bringing the House back on January the 15th, which I think would have killed many of the people who have been through the whole year from Labour National Act. And,
forget Labour. They had a nice holiday. It's the one people who were negotiating the coalition and sort of desperately, going around the country trying to work out where Winston was. That's the ones I feel sorry for. Look, that's us. Just to conclude, the things that Luxon needs to do, there's the vibes, the mojo, and the riz. And then we'll be back on track, as we will shortly. This has gone by lunchtime.
And the ciggies, summer is a great time to bust open the beers and the wines, the vinos.
Enjoy them while you can.
Open a packet of Rothies.
Do that. Don't
get your Winfields.
Your daughter's in the room. I think this is illegal. I think you're going to jail.
Not anymore. Because the country is back on track, Toby.
Oh, dear. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Annabelle. Thank you, listener. Kia ora.